Will I have enough money? For many women, the answer is no.
Women earning 82 cents on the dollar, that sounds like not a lot. But if you add it up over the course of your lifetime and you look at Hispanic women's earnings, which are only 59 cents on the dollar for a white male, they, over the course of their life, earn $1.1 million less. So when we look at retirement account balances and we say, well, this person was smarter and saved more, it's also because they had a lot more to put aside.
Hey everyone, it's Jean Chatzky. Thanks so much for joining me today on Her Money. So up until a decade-ish ago, there was a question that many of us felt that we had at least a ballpark answer to. How long am I going to live? For example, our grandparents, if they lived until they were into their 70s or their 80s, maybe we could expect to do pretty much the same. The thing is, thanks to modern medicine, thanks to the fact that these days people live with and through the sorts of diseases that took down earlier generations, as well as things like good old seatbelts, the average life expectancy in this country has, the pandemic accepted, been on the rise for quite some time now. According to some recent research, women now have as much as a 15% chance of making it to our 100th birthdays. Also, by the year 2039, we may have an average life expectancy of more than 90 years. So while our parents may have needed to plan for about 20-ish years in retirement, it's on us to save and invest for closer to 3, maybe even 4 decades. Because the truth is, as my guest today will tell us, after we turn the calendar page on the first 50 years of our lives, our next 50 could be right behind them. My guest today, Deb Whitman, has dubbed this time period the second 50. And in her new book, she explores the 7 big questions we're asking about midlife and beyond. She knows a thing or two about retirement and the second half of life. Deb is the Executive Vice President and Chief Public Policy Officer at AARP. She's also an economist, an expert on aging issues, with an extensive background in policy making and research. Deb, nice to see you. So glad to have you here.
Thanks, Jean. So good to see you.
You start the book with an anecdote, you and your husband joking around with one another, that you'd live until you were 103. And then he suddenly experienced a heart attack at age 46 on a hike in Colorado. What did that experience do to shape your perspective?
So my husband Glenn and I are of different faiths. So when we wrote our wedding vows, we, instead of writing "I'll love you forever," we chose 103 because it seemed close enough to forever as we could get. And the big joke in our relationship is he's a year older. And so what happens when I'm 103 and he's 104 and no longer has promised to love me anymore? But he was fit and healthy and hiking just outside of Boulder, Colorado by himself when he felt some chest pains. And thank God he asked for help and flagged down some hikers who called Boulder Mountain Rescue, who raced up the mountain and carried him down and got him to the emergency stop room before his heart stopped. The good news is a couple of stints later and a couple broken ribs from the chest compressions, he was fine. My voice still gets a little emotional talking about this. But the beauty of that, and I'm going to say beauty, is that it taught us to really appreciate time, the time that we have, even though we planned for 103 or 104 together in his case, that we really look at every day as being special. And Glenn, actually, one of the things he did afterwards was write letters, over 50 of them, to people in his life that had been important, coaches, teachers, family members, friends, and just had a renewed sense of gratitude that we know is also really good for our health and our longevity. And that's really inspiring to me and helps me to stay grounded in the work that I do. I work on aging, but we really have to appreciate the time we have.
I think that's a really, really good lesson for all of us. But there is all this new research that indicates you're living to 103 or 104 in his case, that your joke might not be that far off. Is that what inspired this book, The Next 50?
A piece of it. Also, I've been working on aging throughout my career, both at the Social Security Administration. I ran the Senate Aging Committee here at AARP. So I've been thinking about the issues of the second 50 my whole career. But I was about to turn 50 myself. And I realized, you know what, there's a lot I don't know and a lot I want to learn. I had books on what to expect when you're expecting. I had books on, my kids were about to go to college. I had a whole pile of those books, the books about my career. But there wasn't a what to expect when you're aging. And so I literally sat down and wrote out the questions that I want to know. And those became the chapters of the book.
Despite the calculations that you and Glenn have run that have him living until 104 when you live to 103, women are likely to outlive men in this equation. Do you think that we need to approach the book and your research differently?
So I do touch on differences by gender. So it's U.S. women live 6 years on average. Jean, I went into a rabbit hole to figure out why that was. I actually spent like 3 weeks trying to look at all the research. And the reasons are, in case you're curious, part of it is our differences in biology. Our hormonal changes actually do help protect us from some infections and other diseases, although they cause a rise in autoimmune diseases. I found a study of monks and nuns that showed if you control for what they're eating and their behavior, women still live 2 years longer. And then it's behaviors that men are more likely to go to war or drive faster in their car or not see the doctor when their heart is not feeling right. So thank God my husband fought against that. But yeah, so women live 6 years longer, but we also earn less over the course of our life. We take more time out to take care of others, either our children or older adult family members. And so when we retire, we need to have more money for longer, but end up having less money, lower Social Security checks, and have to make all of that work. And so I do think aging is a women's issue, very much so. In all of the chapters, I tried to touch on things that are particularly relevant for women or for other populations.
Which brings me to question number 5, which is, will I have enough money? And as you're saying, for many women, the answer is no. So how do you suggest that if we've got a little bit of time before we get there, we do something to change the paradigm for us?
There's a couple things. Well, one is making sure that we think differently about the way we care for people and the way that it's rewarded. So women lose over $300,000 by taking out of time for care, whether, again, it's for child care and they take years out of work and don't contribute to their pensions, and their Social Security checks end up being $4,000 less than men. So we need to really look at care in our society and make sure that we treat it as the job it is and make sure that people aren't hurting themselves financially to help others. We need to look at pay and pay equity. If you look at women earning 82 cents on the dollar, that sounds like not a lot. But if you add it up over the course of your lifetime and you look at like Hispanic women's earnings, which are only 59 cents on the dollar for a white male, they, over the course of their life, earn $1.1 million less. So when we look at retirement account balances and we say, well, this person was smarter and saved more, it's also because they had a lot more to put aside. We also need to look at ways to make sure that we don't have these inequities that are based on gender and age discrimination in the economy.
One of my longstanding beliefs, frustrations, I think you could put it into both categories, is that we can only do so much to control the economy with a capital E, right? We can vote, we can hope to change policies, we can advocate, we can call our congresspeople, but much of the work that needs to be done has to happen in our own personal economies when we look at how we allocate our own resources and the caregiving decisions that we make in our own lives. How do you suggest that in this unfair world, this world where I'm in total agreement that women are still heavily penalized, how do you suggest we do our best on an individual level to make sure that we're not one of the people running out of money when it comes our time to stop working?
Well, when it comes to care, it's really hard because the choice is paying for care or not working. And particularly, we know childcare is ungodly expensive, but elder care is unbelievably expensive. So if you need a nursing home, it's about $100,000 a year. If you need dementia care, I was just speaking to two people the other day who are both spending $200,000 a year to get the type of care that their mothers deserved. So I guess there's choices that we as individuals can make, but it's also, we have a system where we don't have a long-term care program. And this is the side that I go on. I know, Jean, you go on the individuals. And we also have half the people that can't save through their paycheck, and most of those are women. So what I try to do is fight for better programs so that people don't have to make these choices. We have passed laws in 20 states around the country that allow all people to save through their paychecks because it's a voluntary system for employers, and most small employers where a lot of women work don't have that opportunity. So on the long-term care front, we're trying to fight to make sure that we have programs that can help people as well. It's hard for me to say, oh, it's just easy. You don't take care of your mom when she needs you. And it's hard to say that you shouldn't pay the person taking care of your mom either. So it's a real struggle that families are facing. And even our caregiving expert here at AARP had to file for bankruptcy at a certain point because she was taking care of both of her parents. I know you've interviewed her in the past. So I guess while I try to give hopeful advice to individuals, I also really am frustrated that we make people, and especially women, have to make these impossible choices.
Yeah, I think that you're totally right. There are often not very good answers. The work and save programs that AARP has been instrumental in passing in those 20 states are a big move. And for people who don't know about them, these are programs that allow small employers to contribute to IRAs directly from your paycheck. In some states, it's a mandate. In some states, it's not a mandate. But the stats on this are huge. When people contribute through a paycheck deduction, through a payroll deduction, they're 15 times more likely to save, which is incredible when it comes to having something at the end of the road. One of the other questions that you looked into is really closely tied to how much we have by the time we're finished working. And it's how long we're going to work. I want to dig into that one, but I want to take a very quick break first. We are back with Deb Whitman, Chief Policy Officer at AARP, author of the new book, The Second 50. It's such an optimistic title, Deb.
I put it because we often think 50 is the end of our lives, or treat that birthday as being not the middle, but something to avoid. And there's just so much that can happen to us later in life, both good and sometimes bad. But I want us to be thinking a little bit bigger and longer and being prepared. So second 50, we may not all make it there, as we talked about already, but I want us to think big and bold and to understand that lives can be very rich as we age.
Another of your big seven big questions, is how long will I work? And you propose an alternative to our current 3-stage life, which is generally school, work, then retirement. What's the alternative that you think that we should be considering?
So that's the way we've done it for many decades. I went to public school and basic school and then to college in your 20s, work for the next 40 years, and then you retire. But technology is changing fast. And we're going to continue to need to learn throughout our lives. And so lifelong learning has to be a component of a longer life, whether you use the lifelong learning for work or just to keep yourself sharp and engaged and learning. And so one of the things that I wrote about was a proposal that Mark Freeman, formerly from Encore, and I think you've had him on your podcast in the past, and I put together, thinking about how hard it is for people who may be raising their family, paying off a mortgage, to go back to school. And so the idea was that you could tap your Social Security funds for up to 18 months if you were enrolled in full-time education. And again, this is not a ton of money mid-career. You'd have to be fully vested in a Social Security program, so you'd have to work for at least 10 years before you could do this. But it allows people to think about, okay, maybe I want to change my career entirely, or maybe I want to get new certifications. I had the Social Security actuaries cost it out, and it actually grows the economy because people are more productive if they're able to continue learning. And so it costs almost nothing. And so we need to rethink our programs and the way that we invest in people throughout their lives as people's lives are getting longer. There's a program in Singapore where they give every single person some money. I think it was only like $300 and something, but to take classes throughout their lives. And if you're over 40, you actually get a top up over that. And it goes actually till older ages because they want older people to stay engaged, and they have silver universities and they have job retraining classes. All of those are helping grow their economy, but also really helping their workforce be relevant and to be able to work for careers that are maybe changing and adapting.
I love this idea. I've told this story. I think I've told it on the air before. I'm not sure, about my father who retired from his career, the career where he spent most of his life, in his early 70s. And he got sick shortly thereafter, but he talked about going to law school. Like, he wanted to go to law school in his 70s. And I think if he had been healthy, he absolutely would have done it. And I don't know what he would have done with those new skills, but I do know that work made him very happy. So I expect he would have gone back in and done something. I know you've seen 70 and 80-year-olds who are still working and still love their jobs. What does it look like at those ages?
Well, I've seen both people that love their jobs and never want to leave it, and it's part of their identity, it's part of their purpose, it's part of the social fabric of their lives, which is really important to health. And, I have a friend whose dad is an accountant and has his families that he's helped for decades. And that is something he just loves doing well into his late 70s. And then there are people that are working because they have to. So one of the people I interviewed for the book, his name is Cindy, and she had been a medical technician and had saved up a bit in that job, but then needed some major dental work. Medicare doesn't cover your teeth, your eyes, and your ears, 3 things that do need more help as you age. And that was really expensive. It took a big chunk of her savings out. She needed some major car work. That took another big chunk of her savings. And finally, she had to go back to work. And she's working as a greeter on her feet for many hours well into her 70s. And so I tell that story because there's lots of reasons that people are working longer, and not everybody enjoys it, but there are people that really do and want to.
You argue in the book that if our country were to offer more support to people who are older, to people who are retired, it could have trickle-down effects on everyone. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we often think that there's a zero-sum game out there, that if more older people work, that will take jobs away from younger people. When in the economics profession, we know that the more workers you have, the faster the economy grows and there's more jobs for everyone. That's one of the reasons why when women went into the workforce, they really caused the entire economy to grow. One of the programs we've done is called Age-Friendly Communities, and we had over 900 cities and towns and states across the country that have become age-friendly and looked at their transportation and housing and health systems. But what's good for older people is often good for younger people as well. If you have better transportation systems to get you to health appointments, you know what? Moms need to go to health appointments too. If you have curb cuts, they're great for people with strollers. And then lastly, spending, we often think just go to the one person. So if we spend on children's education, that's actually making them healthier older adults. So we are investing in their health as well as their education. And in the same way we talked about investing in long-term care, is investing in their daughters and their nieces and nephews and other family members to be able to continue to work. So what I'm really calling for is to think about demographic change in this country in the same way we're thinking about climate change. We need to prepare. The difference is older people are the fastest growing natural resource that we have. And if we can take advantage of this wealth of talent and wisdom, we can have a better society, not just as a whole, but for each of us as individuals.
One of the most optimistic statistics that you cite in your book is the fact that dementia rates have actually been declining. That was surprising to me because I have been reading headlines, and so of course I thought that they've been going up, but it made me really happy to see. Can you explain what's really going on there and how, as we prepare to use our older population as a resource, we can help ourselves along there as well?
Yeah. So, and this is, if we ask people the biggest fear about aging, it is often losing their memory.
Yep.
And anybody who's experienced that in their family, you understand why it's a fear. But half of us think we will get dementia, and only 15% of people over age 75 even have mild cognitive impairment. And you're right, the actual rates are going down. So the number of people are going up because we have more older people, but the rates are going down. And that's largely because the baby boomers have a higher level of education. And education is a protective factor for us in getting dementia. In fact, we could reduce 40% of cases of dementia worldwide by encouraging healthy behaviors, reducing air pollution. There's lots we can do as a society and then also as individuals. If you do 5 healthy habits, which include eating right, exercising, not smoking, not drinking too much, and maintaining a healthy body weight, you can reduce your risk factors for dementia by 1/3 and increase your life expectancy by over a decade. So the other thing was people feel like it's inevitable, there's nothing you can do. And actually there's a lot you can do. And some of it's pretty simple, like making sure if you are hard of hearing, that you get your hearing checked and also use hearing-assisted devices. And the last thing we should do is if we're facing changes in our cognitive abilities, talk to your doctor. Recently, my dad was having some hallucinations that trees were growing out of the wall. And it was caused by a new medication that he was on. And when he went off of it, he was fine. So don't think that cognitive changes are all something to hide and be worried about, but really something to be proactive and address. So hopefully that's helpful for people that are worried about this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the 5 healthy habits that you mentioned, people need to understand that they're not going to save you just a lot in terms of lifespan. They're going to save you a ton of money. We spend 70% of our healthcare budget caring for chronic diseases. We could really save ourselves a whole lot of money that we could use to put toward living the life that we want. We are at the end of our time together. We're going to wrap this up, but I just wanted to ask you, for people who are thinking they still have some of the questions that you articulated at the top of the list, of course, we want them to read the book, pick up the second 50. Beyond that, what's your best piece of advice for them?
So we just talked about the healthy habits. I think everybody knows you're supposed to eat right and exercise. And I told you they give you a decade longer of life. But even if you do one, you get 2 additional years. And most people don't realize actually how important their behaviors and their mindset are to their health. So if you have strong relationships and are connected to your community, you live longer and are healthier. And if you view aging as a positive time in life, as a time of wisdom and ability to give back. You live 7.5 years longer. You have fewer heart attacks and health conditions, and even have a lower risk of cognitive decline and dementia. So positive views on aging are just as important as eating that salad and going on that long walk.
Love it. Deb Whitman, the book is The Second 50. Where would you like us to go for more information?
So you can come to aarp.org/second50, or you can go to your favorite bookseller.
Amazing. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thanks, team. It was a lot of fun.